let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes in importance of
What is that process that a developer, or let's say,
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of In the Clouds. I am your host, Stu Miniman. It is mid-May, and that means we are just a couple of days away from thousands of people coming here to my backyard. Red Hat Summit and Ansible Fest are going to be here in Boston, Massachusetts next week. Super exciting. Last year, we had a rather small event. I've had some really good discussions there, but my feedback was it didn't really feel like Red Hat Summit, something I had attended many years before I joined Red Hat. And this year, all indications are we are back in full force. The session's there. We've got some great keynotes planned, lots of good customers sharing their stories. Of course, we'll be front-ending the week with OpenShift Commons, which has a great lineup. And then the Red Hat Summit, there's a partner ecosystem day and so many other ancillary activities. And so that means all of us at Red Hat have been really, really busy. And I'm really happy to be able to grab for a few minutes for this session somebody that I know has been really busy this week leading up to this activity. So that's Andy Cathrow. Andy is a senior director of product management. He has the cloud services team at Red Hat. Andy, I know you and the team super busy. We're going to be talking a little bit about 4.13, a little bit about Red Hat Summit and your journey. So thanks so much for joining me.
Great. Thank you for having me, Stu.
All right, Andy, what if you could, you're a longtime Red Hatter, and want to tell us a little bit about your background, and let's go from there.
I guess, kind of long time. I'm what they call a boomerang. So you see, with most Red Hatters, there'd be like a hat on the back wall. With me, there's two. So my first tenure at Red Hat, I'm now on my second. So I spent 9 years at Red Hat. Early 2000s, so the days when open source was something that was frightening and you had to get an exception to deploy it. I launched KVM at Red Hat, Red Hat virtualization, OpenStack, RDO, and then 5 years out doing some IoT at VeriSign, doing some container security at Anchor, and then managed services at Rackspace, which brought me back into Red Hat, which is great. And it brought me back to Red Hat within managed services. And I think that journey, that 5 years out, the way I spin it to myself when I think about it is, it gave me some time to think, some time to kind of learn and get a different perspective. And my perspective now is not as a product guy, but as somebody who does services, right? And the time at Rackspace especially was important to kind of recalibrate. And that kind of maps back to Red Hat's journey from being, a product company and now to be a services company, right? With, great offerings from, app and data services and the platform services that I look after, which is Azure Red Hat OpenShift, ARO, OpenShift Dedicated, OSD, and Red Hat OpenShift Service on AWS or Rosa.
Yeah, that's awesome, Andy. And yeah, I like, as you said, the early days, open source was a little scary. I guess some of it is we're a little bit more comfortable with the chaos that is open source because it still is, it's an interesting landscape that we live in. But, Red Hat has decades of experience. We make it easier for customers. We've helped grow this ecosystem quite a lot. But cloud services, Andy, have changed an awful lot. One of talk tracks I talk with customers, OpenShift itself started as OpenShift Online, but that's very different from the Arrow Rosa OSD offerings that you talk about today, or even I have to imagine there's quite a few differences from the world that you lived in when you were a racker. Can you talk a little bit about that maturation of cloud services, what you've seen in the last decade where, cloud and open source were kind of early to now, open source is the default way we develop software, and, cloud is a big piece of most companies' overall environment.
Yeah, let me start with the open side first. And I saw a customer in Atlanta a couple of months ago who I met probably 2006, 2007. And at the time, we were explaining about Linux and GPL. It wasn't going to impact them. And they went through a long process to get an exception to deploy open source. And then when I met with them recently, everything is open by default. There's an exception process for proprietary, and the world has changed. And I look at, when I left Red Hat, our relationship with Microsoft was maybe not on the best of terms, right? As I come back now, we've got a joint service with Microsoft. We have them keynoting on the stage at Summit. Like, we have a great relationship, right? Focusing on the customers, right? So to see how open source has really changed the industry has been incredible. And then services, and I think there's two perspectives to services that you hear even from Red Hat, right? So one is it's new when we're making this move to managed services, and why do you want to manage service? That conversation with the customer. But I think most of the industry and customers are like, it's managed, it's on the cloud, it's managed. And I think, as an industry, we've moved away from that's my computer, don't touch it, to can you just do the plumbing, right? And give us that. And our whole pitch around services to our customers, who are really the most technical customers in the industry, an OpenShift customer, especially from the early days, they're a Linux savvy user, they know the depth of the product. They could manage it, right? There's nothing that we did that they couldn't do, right? And the pitch that we give is like, let's move you away from 24/7 operations to 9/5 innovation. Sure, you can do patching at 2 a.m. You can do the plumbing, you can do the testing and validation, but if we can do that for you, you spend your time doing the differentiating work, like doing that innovation, right? And that's just been kind of a great journey to have. We still have those customer conversations, or the customer who really wants to still manage it. But then we talk about, well, are you doing a service mesh? Are you doing serverless? Are you looking at these technologies? Well, no, because, well, I do the boring things. We keep the lights on for you. You can then innovate. And so, it's been a great journey, and to see, some of our lighthouse customers are really sophisticated customers. Take Delta, we see on stage. We saw last week at Think on stage. They know how to run a Kubernetes platform. They know how to manage and patch OpenShift, but they know the differentiation that they need is in the business apps on top of the platform. And that's a common theme. Don't think just because you're sophisticated, you shouldn't use a managed service, right? Because you're sophisticated, use a managed service and look up the stack.
Yeah, great points, Andy. Every customer I talk to, right, I could do it, but as our friends at Amazon like to say, what is that undifferentiated heavy lifting? Every customer I talk to, whether you have SREs or don't even know what an SRE is, you've got scarce resources. Where should you be spending your time? Just like today, there's very few customers that roll out and manage their own email system. They just consume it. We think Kubernetes is going to be a lot the same way, and therefore many customers can do that. I want to talk a lot more about Rosa and some of your space, but last week we had the what's new in OpenShift 4.13. So I think one of the things that we always talk about, all of the great technical features, all of your peers in product management go into a lot of detail as to what's coming on there. But one of the things that caught my eyes, and why I'm glad to have you on it, is there was discussion as to how we develop OpenShift itself. And today, that is really what we call a services first methodology. Yeah. It reminds me, Andy, is this like, Microsoft? I remember a bunch of years back, they said, when they build all their software, first it runs in Azure, and then, it goes everywhere else. Are we talking about Red Hat as kind of a similar methodology today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, what I'm most excited about for 4.13, so the Lucky 13 release, isn't necessarily these individual features. It's this change in philosophy. You've seen, us moving this direction for a number of releases now, where what a lot of our team, worked on from the service delivery part is how do you wrap OpenShift, self-managed, and deliver it to customers, right? And so there's work that we'd have to do to take a product and turn it into a service. What we're seeing here now is this service first, mentality, which is we're going to build something designed to be a service. Right? And the key part about that, and I don't want to jump straight into hosted control planes and HyperShift, but it excites me, so I'm going to jump there, is the team looked at OpenShift and what we have to do to deploy and manage and said, well, if this was a managed service, how would we do it? And a good example would be, I wouldn't put the control plane in the customer's account. I'd put it in a service account. I wouldn't expose a number of interfaces to the customer because they don't control the control plane, right? And the whole methodology of design to be run in the cloud as a service, right? And we really see that in 4.13 and the hosted control planes feature, which is the most exciting one for me, because again, we've built something to be a service rather than wrapping something and doing the extra work to turn it into a service. Now, there's many more things in 4.13. I mean, Cube 126, to say the least. Moving to RHEL 9 is exciting to get C groups v2, right? That level of control, right? The more substitute in terms of that for, memories, CPU, IO, etc. And then there's some features that you look at the release list with your own particular lens. For me, it's what are my customers looking for? So, one of those is custom metrics autoscaler, like big deal for customers with dynamic workloads. Another one for our Google customers is shared VPCs, or XVM. So I think for me, those are the highlights. There's many on-premise features. We could talk about some of the vSphere features, but I get excited about what we're doing now on the Google, on Azure, and on AWS.
Oh yeah, Andy, we'll pull out some of those deep conversations to bring you back to your roots of the virtualization technologies, which I know you still love.
But, I do.
Yeah, but it's interesting because our message has been for a number of years now. Really, it's an OpenShift everywhere message. And when I talk to customers, I'm like, look, are there some little differences between how we build something in Amazon versus with Microsoft versus at the edge? There are times that we have to do things a little bit differently, but we're always trying to, take out the sandpaper and, buff out those rough edges between them, because it's the consistency of OpenShift everywhere. But, there were some pieces that, I saw in there. It's like, the compact cluster support now available in AWS and Azure, single node OpenShift now available on AWS. Those pieces that we had them outside of the cloud or self-managed, and so some of those differences. So now with it leading with the cloud services, we know what a big growth area it's been for the company, and a very large focus of us. We should have less of those rough edges, we would hope, between some of the various environments.
Absolutely. And you said, I think, one of my favorite words there. So everyone talks about hybrid cloud. To me, consistency, and that's the word you used, that's the one I think is most important. And when I speak to customers, they want that consistency of the tooling, the support, the life cycle, like the value-added services that they're running on-prem that they're now going to do on AWS or they're going to do on Azure. Right? And then how we can bring that consistency in the way that we operate to customers is critical.
Yeah. And can you give us a little bit, it's one of the things that consistency is important, but sometimes we're like, oh, Red Hat, you're the Switzerland of these environments. And I was like, I actually push back on that, because I know how much work your team does to deeply integrate with Microsoft. If you look at Arrow, it looks and acts many ways like a Microsoft service in the console. I remember when it was first up there, it didn't even say Red Hat the first time. There was just the O logo, and you kind of figured it out. In Amazon, sometimes there's some native services that we're using, and like Roland Barcia at the OpenShift Commons in Amsterdam did a phenomenal presentation talking about, ACK and all the other integrations that we do to deeply work with all of those native services on AWS. So how do we balance, like, I want consistency, but I want to deeply work in every single environment as close to the way I should in that cloud?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because yes, on one hand, consistency is key. On the other hand, from a customer point of view, if you decided to run on AWS or on Azure or on Google, you want to take advantage of all of those services. So that's where this partnership comes in, right? So, if I look at the interfaces that we have with Microsoft, with AWS, we're not delivering a product that we drop on top. We have engineering teams working together, right? And there are some features that are going to be best engineered by a Microsoft engineer or by an Azure engineer, right, into the platform. And so they'll focus their time there doing an integration right? And we have, for example, if you take ARO, we have product management team working for me, a product management team over at Azure, and we collaborate on the joint roadmap together and how we slice and dice that work. So I think the way that you get that tight integration isn't just by reading API docs and implement something, it's by working with the vendor, right? And there's the influence that we've had within the leading cloud vendors on their roadmap and how they've built their platforms, right? And it's not a one-way relationship. Like there's a great symbiotic relationship there. And so I think the key to that is that close partnership, right? And what's funny to me now is I get this question a lot, and it's one I always want to raise is someone says to me, why would I pick OpenShift over EKS or AKS? And in that case, I'll say, well, actually, let me get somebody from Azure or somebody from AWS to answer that question for you. Right? That's the best way to handle it. The answer you typically will hear is OpenShift isn't enterprise Kubernetes. It's an application tech platform. And Aero and Rosa are turnkey application platforms that bring all of your development tools, runtime, builds, monitoring, etc., into one integrated box. Battery is included but swappable. And if you want an app platform, here you go. If you want the DIY, we've got EKS, we've got AKS. Right. So I think the way that we get this tight integration is leveraging the partners, right? And they've got great insights into their world, and then we work on that integration. I think that's the key.
Yeah, Andy, it's so important, and you're right. When we can just have Amazon and Azure share why they brought us into their console and launch those first-party services, that's so powerful. I know when I was at reInvent in December, some of the conversations I was having with the Amazon people was, customers, they choose Kubernetes because of that vast ecosystem that's out there. And often Amazon's getting questions about, hey, I want to use this service or that service, can that work in my environment? And they're like, well, you could just work with that on top of, the Kubernetes that we have, or you can just use Rosa because that includes then all of these services, and Red Hat's done all the integration work and it's fully supported, and then you as a customer don't have to do all of that extra work yourself. So it was just so nice to hear them be like, hey, we understand the value customers are asking us, and it is very much differentiated from like Kubernetes is great, but Kubernetes is a very small piece of what customers need all together. So
absolutely, it's a crucial building block, but it's not the solution. Like you deploy Kubernetes to run an application, and everything else you bring is what we provide with OpenShift.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Rosa specifically, Andy. I look at it. It's a little over 2 years since the product was first launched. From an engineering standpoint, I know there's a lot of work that's been done jointly. You mentioned the Delta CIO on stage at Think last week, which was awesome. I'd actually interviewed the CIO at Red Hat Summit in 2019. Know how much expertise they have. I talk to the Delta team every once in a while, and that was such a phenomenal proof point to come forth and them talk about how important Rosa is for them. They're launching, it's their Wi-Fi service runs on it across 600 planes. Can you just speak a little bit about kind of the maturity, momentum, maybe some customers that we're going to see Amazon at our show next week?
So I think one of the critical things about Delta working with Rosa is Delta didn't pick Red Hat OpenShift. Delta picked this joint service, right? Amazon is an important partner very important, critical partner for Delta. So having an AWS service was critical. And then the advantage of Rosa was that's something that they know well, OpenShift. They take the value of OpenShift above Kubernetes, and then but to have that as a joint service. If we weren't a joint partnership, I think it would be a different story, right? So that relationship, is critical to all the three companies involved. If I look at their their journey from kind of on-prem, going to the cloud. Right? And that consistency then plays to that. That's been kind of a critical part of development and this is consistent with all customers we work with. We don't want to lift and shift. Right? The way you may have developed OpenShift on-prem is different to how you're going to use it in the cloud. Right? You don't have static resources of servers and storage. you have this infinite pool that you could leverage in creative ways to save costs and be more nimble for your customers. And so that's where, again, the joint expertise of Red Hat with OpenShift, and in this case, AWS with Rosa comes into play. And again, you'll see there's more customers on that you'll see at the summit. Number of sessions we go into, but you'll see a very consistent story. They're looking for more than just Kubernetes, right? They have the skills to do that integration themselves. What they're looking from us is a prepackaged solution that they can take to market and get value very quickly.
Yeah, Andy, you talked about, you have the platform services. I'm curious, how's your team work with things like, Red Hat OpenShift, data science? The other product we've been talking about recently is taking our Red Hat Advanced Cluster Security for Kubernetes and having a cloud services that. My understanding that those go together on the cloud services. So how does that joint development and, how do we handle that internally?
Yeah, sure. So I think that data science and AI is a very cool space to be in now. So I think Stephen Hules, who runs that team, is on stage with me later next week. So how we work together, I mean, my job is to provide a platform that's the best platform for running your applications and developing them. Right. So I've got to service, our customer base out there in the market, also the internal customers. Right now, there's a lot of work that goes into building the best platform for AI for the Rhodes team to use. So there again, we treat them as kind of, I don't want to say patient zero, that sounds like someone's sick, but right there's some of the early adopters of the technology that we have that help and drive the roadmap. Right? And it's exciting to see us move from just platform services up the stack and customers looking to leverage those skills, right, that experience that we have with Rhodes. Likewise with ACS, with our College of ACM, again, our goal is to be the best platform for them to run on. Now, often a lot of that work doesn't come from my team; it comes from the core OCP team. I get to stand on the shoulders of giants, right? When we sell our offering, so we're making sure that we're thinking about core use cases like cloud, like AI, and like edge. Right? It's a core pillar for us when we plan each OpenShift release.
Wonderful. So you mentioned you're going to be on stage with Stephen Hules. Give us a little bit, if you could, what to expect from you and your team. I know we've got, Microsoft, Amazon, both going to be prominent at the show with us. And I've even got, I'm super excited. I've got a customer panel I'll be running, talking about, app modernization, and have a few customers that have been a few years on their journey, similar to what you talked about with Delta. But what businesses, transformations they've built, what new offerings that they've built on top of it. And I always love to be able to help enable those customers to share with their peers. So what else can we expect from you and the team?
Yeah, so I think 3 sessions. I've got there's an Ask the Expert session with lots of the OpenShift team. I'm doing a cloud services and strategy session, but then the roadmap sessions are always the kind of most interesting. So Stephen will be digging into kind of app and data services with a focus on data science and AI. I'll be talking through what's coming now with OpenShift Dedicated, with Rosa, and with ARO. I think the biggest announcement that I've got is around, I think I mentioned hosted control planes probably 2 or 3 times already. I may have 2 or 3 times before we finish. So that's going to be one of the biggest ones where we're talking about the preview program and the upcoming GA, and how customers can save significantly, typically $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 per year per cluster, as well as improving the agility, where they can provision clusters in like 5 to 7 minutes rather than 45 to 55 minutes on traditional OpenShift, and some of the added features that we get from the HyperShift or the hosted control planes architecture. We'll be talking about what's coming new with Google, things like shared VPCs, a number of new features in the ARO platform, especially around security. We've got a lot of banking FSI customers moving to Azure, so the roadmap you see reflects some of the more detailed security requirements that they have. So lots of exciting announcements coming. And we have a couple of workshops. If you've not tried Rosa yet or ARO, on Wednesday and Thursday, we have workshops where you can get hands-on, go through a lab, go through deploying and managing applications on each platform.
Yeah, definitely. I know some of my team are running some of the labs. From what I hear, they're all sold out. They've been asking for extra sessions because, as I said at the top, this should look and feel what people are familiar with Red Hat Summit. And that means a lot of people are going to get hands on keyboards, geeking out, digging deep into it. As you said, roadmaps are always super interesting. And I'm sure, Andy, everybody's going to come and want to get their hands on and try out like the hosted control plane environment. Does that make labs easier too? If it sounds like, spin things up faster, I don't have to worry about certain things. And, hey, it helps on the underlying cost too. So that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, fast and easy. 5 minutes to get a cluster makes it a lot easier. And the other thing is we can also now send a link, right? If you don't get a chance to go to a lab, here's a document. You can go through the lab yourself. You just need an Azure account or an Amazon account, and you can deploy and go through the same process. So again, the move to cloud services simplifies a lot of things, especially for demos here at Summit.
All right. Well, hey, if those of you watching, if you haven't already, if you go to redhat.com/summit, you can still sign up for the virtual participation, which does have the keynotes will be live streaming. There are some virtual sessions online. And if you're on social media, on Twitter, it's always been hashtag RH Summit to be able to participate and watch along. So, Andy, I'll give you the final word. I know a lot of work your team's been doing to get ready for it. What are you most looking forward to next week?
Well, for me personally, it's meeting with the customers, right? That's the most exciting thing, to get so many customers in one place after the years of COVID and isolation. So that's kind of number one for me. And then I think I mentioned the hosted control planes launch. Some more exciting announcements that I can't tease my colleagues' announcements that are coming up, but I think just a couple of the first two keynotes would be exciting. But again, come find me kind of at the booth, AIC@redhat.com. Questions about cloud services. We've got a lot of smart people from my team with me, engineers and SREs. Would love to meet you, take your questions. And if you don't get hands-on, Azure console, AWS console, our services are there. Come try them out for the cost of a latte. You can be running an OpenShift cluster.
All right. That's awesome, Andy. I like that. Price of a latte, get to try it out. Myself too, Andy, super excited. Customer meetings, that customer panel I'm running. We've got great partners coming. So I got a bunch of friends that I know are coming to Boston. The weather is supposed to be, it's interesting. We had like 80-degree weather for a couple of days, and now it's like dropped down to feeling more like fall. I kind of like a light jacket weather. It gets a little bit windy in the seaport sometimes. So just make sure dress appropriately. It's not going to be shorts and t-shirts outside, but usually the convention centers are kind of cold too. So it's a little bit more consistent inside and out. So Andy, looking forward to seeing you and the team. I'll be spending some time in your cloud services booth. I've got some of the Ask the Experts sessions too. So really, really good stuff. So yeah, as a final, the links are up in the comments for where to come to Red Hat Summit. Thank you, Andy, for joining. Congrats to everybody on all the effort that went into both OpenShift 4.13 and all the prep for Red Hat Summit. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have suggestions as to other topics or guests that you would like to see on this program. We will be, rolling through sessions during the summer. So keep an eye, make sure to like and subscribe to the Red Hat and OpenShift channels on YouTube. And we will have lots more coming for you. So thank you, as always, for joining us on your journey in the clouds. I'm Stu Miniman. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week at Red Hat Summit and Ansible Fest.